स्वामी जी बीमार बेहोश थे, कोमा में पड़े हुए थे और अंततोगत्वा 13 दिन हो गए, शायद 31 मार्च को उनका देहांत हो गया। वो अरुणाचल प्रदेश में गए, यानी एक कठिन जो स्थान है जहाँ रामकृष्ण मिशन का बड़ा प्रभाव पड़ता है और जहाँ रामकृष्ण मिशन की बड़ी कदर होती है, वहाँ कई बार वो गए और वहाँ उन्होंने कई वर्ष वहाँ साधना की। एक प्रकार से ये मिशन को चलाना भी तो साधना है। और पिछले 20 वर्ष से यहाँ दिल्ली में रहे। तो अब उनके स्वामी शांतात्मानंद जी उनके स्थान पे आए हैं। इन सब को भी हम लोगों का पूरा सहयोग मिलेगा, जैसे स्वामी गोकुलानंद जी को मिला था। और स्वामी गोकुलानंद जी ने जिस प्रकार से इस दिल्ली सेंटर का प्रबंध किया था, जिस प्रकार से उन्होंने यहाँ कार्यक्रम रखे थे, ये देखिए सारा का सारा ये भवन भरा हुआ है। नया ऑडिटोरियम उन्होंने बनाया बड़े सुंदर ढंग से, बहुत अच्छा आनंद आता है वहाँ। गर्मियों में भी एयर कंडीशन है, वो बहुत उन्होंने विस्तार किया। मुझे विश्वास है कि रामकृष्ण मिशन आगे भी कार्य अच्छा करता रहेगा। रामकृष्ण मिशन की एक बड़ी विशेषता है, वो किसी एक व्यक्ति विशेष के ऊपर निर्भर नहीं। स्वामी विवेकानंद जैसे महापुरुष भी इसीलिए उन्होंने इसकी स्थापना की। नहीं तो हमारे हिंदू धर्म में होता ये है कि जब तक गुरु होता है जीवित, तब तक तो बहुत अच्छा कार्यक्रम चलता है, लेकिन गुरु का जब देहांत हो जाता है तो पीछे से फिर परस्पर विरोध आरंभ हो जाता है। कई बातें होती हैं, आप देखते ही हैं, पढ़ते ही। लेकिन रामकृष्ण मिशन ने ये एक ऐसी अच्छी एक परंपरा स्थापित की है कि व्यक्ति आए व्यक्ति जाए। जो बड़े बड़े लोग हैं, जैसे स्वामी रंगनाथानंद जी ही गए, स्वामी लोकेश्वरानंद जी, दो बहुत बड़े महान स्वामी जिनके साथ मेरा बड़ा घनिष्ठ संबंध रहा, वो चले गए। लेकिन उनकी जगह पे रामकृष्ण मिशन के सन्यासी गण उनका स्थान दे देते हैं। उसी प्रकार से मुझे पूरा विश्वास है कि स्वामी गोकुलानंद जी को जहाँ हम श्रद्धांजलि अर्पित करते हैं, वहाँ हमें पूरा सहयोग स्वामी जी को देना है और इस मिशन को आगे चलाना है। और जिस तरीके से ये वेदांत को अभिव्यक्त करती है रामकृष्ण मिशन, जिस तरीके से गरीब और पसमानदा और पिछड़े हुए दुखी लोगों की सेवा करती है, ये बहुत बड़ा कार्य है। इस कार्य में मैं तो 50 वर्ष से संबंधित हूँ, न जाने पूर्व जन्म में भी संबंधित रहा होगा, लेकिन मुझे लगता है कि इस कार्य को आगे बढ़ाना बड़ा ज़रूरी है। और आप सब जो हैं, आप सब भक्त ही जो हैं, भक्त ही एक संस्था को बनाते हैं। केवल एक गुरु रहे तो गुरु अकेला रहे तो ठीक है, अपने स्थान पे है, लेकिन गुरु की महिमा, गुरु का प्रचार, गुरु का महत्व तब होता है जब भक्त गण उसके, सहायक गण उसके। आप देख लीजिए स्वामी जी कितने आपके यहाँ स्वामी गोकुलानंद जी के भक्त और सहायक यहाँ हैं। मेरी आप सबको बड़ी बड़ी हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं हैं। भगवान शंकर को प्रार्थना है स्वामी गोकुलानंद जी की आत्मा अपनी प्रगति पे आगे बढ़ता रहे। पूर्व में तो कहते हैं मे हिज सोल रेस्ट इन पीस, लेकिन हम ये नहीं मानते कि सोल रेस्ट करता है। वो तो एक नकारात्मक विचारधारा है। हम तो समझते चरे बीती जो जीवात्मा है वो तो बढ़ता ही रहता है। वो जब तक परम धाम तक नहीं पहुंचता तब तक वो आत्मा चलती रहती है और उसका विस्तार होता रहता है। तो मेरी पूरा विश्वास है कि स्वामी जी की आत्मा हमेशा आशीर्वाद यहाँ बनाए रखेगी और अपना आध्यात्मिक कार्य में आगे बढ़ती रहेगी। भगवान शंकर से मेरी यही प्रार्थना है। ध्यायेत नित्यम महेशम रजत गिरिनिभं चारु चंद्रावतंसं रत्नाकल्पोज्ज्वलांगं परशुमृगवराभीति हस्तं प्रसन्नं पद्मासीनं समन्तात् स्तुतमर्गणैः व्याघ्रकृतिं वसामि विश्वाद्यं विश्ववन्द्यं निखिल भयहरं पंचवक्त्रं त्रिनेत्रम्।
दुनिया में आपके व्यवहार में भरपूर शराफत देखी है। दुनिया ने आपके व्यवहार में भरपूर शराफत देखी है। मैं तो आपकी सूरत में भगवान की मूरत देखी है। मैं अब निमंत्रण करना चाहता हूँ श्री राजीव मेहरोत्रा जी को 2 शब्द कहें।
I have to confess that I feel quite overwhelmed and nervous speaking to such an august gathering. The Ramakrishna Mission has a rich tradition of oratory, of which we have already witnessed a great deal. I'm extremely uncomfortable at having been referred to as a distinguished guest on the stage. I'm a humble aspirant who is deeply privileged and deeply blessed to have come under the tutelage of Swami Gokulananda Maharaj. I grew up in the crucible of the Ramakrishna Mission as a young boy, attending the teachings of Swami Ranganathananda at the Gold Park in Calcutta. And I went off studying abroad, and when I returned to India, deeply anguished about my own identity, confused about my spirituality, more than 20 years ago, when Swami Gokulananda had just taken over as the General Secretary, as the head of the Ramakrishna Mission in Delhi, was when I had my first contact with him. And beyond the creator of institutions, beyond the large social work projects, the new auditorium, the great growth and progress and development that he nurtured at the Ramakrishna Mission in Delhi, to me he was very intimately and personally a teacher of great personal erudition, of great insight, and the ability to deeply understand the pain, the anguish and the suffering and the confusion of an ordinary aspirant, a householder aspirant. And I think that for me has been the great quality of Swami Gokulananda, to be able to span these many roles. And I will not forget that I came to see him at the ground floor office here 20 odd years ago, with grand illusions of spirituality, of seeking guidance, of practice, of, well, shortcuts to enlightenment. And I think he realized very quickly that that journey was a long, long, long one, and I was very, very far from it. And it was a measure of his pragmatism that he said, look, you're nowhere near ready to do anything, including, I said, well, teach me some breathing, teach me something, the elements of this, of a practice, of a sadhana. And he said, well, I think at this stage you just need to go and listen to some music. You need to calm down. You need to still your mind. And none of the practices and techniques that the tradition has to offer will work till your mind has become calm. He was over the years to write several books and to counsel several individuals on the journey. So Lakshmi Jinjawala had just mentioned this aspect of Diksha. I've been privileged over many decades to be in touch with Swami Ranganathananda Maharaj. In Hyderabad, I visited him. I was privileged to do a television interview with him several times. And again, it was Swami Gokulananda who nudged me, much as he did Mr. Janjanwala, on a visit of Swami Ranganathananda to Delhi. And he said, well, look, he's been your teacher for so long, and I think it's time that you received Diksha. And I think it was this wonderful openness that the tradition of the Ramakrishna Mission has established. Here was a senior monk of the order, nurturing and cultivating my aspirations. And the celebration that further marked was that over a period of time, my own journey led me to Buddhism. And in a sense, moving away from the bhakti aspects, perhaps, if I may put it that way, of the Ramakrishna tradition, of the worship of Kali, or even the karma yoga that Swami Vivekananda had taught. And I became a student of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And one of the great moments of my life was that when Swami Gokulananda mentioned or responded with great enthusiasm and warmth to the setting up of a meeting, a dialogue, which I was privileged to moderate between the Dalai Lama and Swami Ranganathananda in Calcutta. So while I maintained, and I have maintained with great blessing and great learning, a relationship with the Ramakrishna Mission, I think that the great value that the mission has brought to secular life in India has been its celebration of a fundamental commitment to secular ideals derived from the very example of Sri Ramakrishna himself, who experienced and practiced the sadhanas of different traditions. So quite apart from the bringing to bear, in a sense, one of the few Hindu institutions that have sustained a philosophy of social work over generations and over a series of leaderships, has been this celebration of secularism. And I think that Swami Gokulananda, living and working in cosmopolitan Delhi, was very uniquely positioned to demonstrate that through his gestures of celebrations of other faiths and their festivals in the Ramakrishna Mission. And I remember a nun of the Convent of Jesus and Mary telling me that, Christmas Eve we go and have lunch at the Ramakrishna Mission with Swami Gokulananda. And I think it was embodying those larger, broader, all-encompassing social ideals which really made Swami Gokulanandaji such a special person and who made such a valuable contribution to our lives. Memorial meetings are often consolations. We tell each other about the inevitability of death, of the processes of dying, and how the baton is passed. And we are deeply honored and privileged that it has been passed to a monk of the great distinction of Swami Shantatmanandaji, who becomes now the torchbearer of the tradition here in Delhi. I think there is much to learn from the way that Swami Gokulanandaji spawned this great dedication, this great commitment in a city of bureaucrats, politicians, of consumerism, of a very utilitarian approach to life, that he was equally at home with politicians and bureaucrats, atheists and agnostics and devotees and believers, as he was a man with a common touch. And above all, I think that for me, this great reverence and this great devotion that I have felt to Swami Gokulananda and continue to feel for his memory derived from his immense, quiet self-confidence to be able to say, I don't know. Very often we master the scriptures, we can repeat the lines, we can quote from Vivekananda and Ramakrishna, but very rarely do we embody those teachings. Have we internalized it so that it becomes a natural reflex? Or are we able to cultivate the humility to acknowledge we don't know when we don't know? We always feel obliged to come up with an answer. There's a homeopath in Delhi, Dr. Kalyan Banerjee, who's very well known. And last year in August, his daughter was washed down the river near Haridwar, and her body was located 10 or 12 days later. I'm a patient of Dr. Banerjee and an admirer of his, and I'd gone calling to their home, and I saw the deep anguish that Dr. Banerjee and his family were going through. And I heard that Swami Gokulanandaji was at the Chittaranjan Park temple, which was next door. And so I went to the temple and I said, look, here is someone who's deeply anguished, who needs consolation, who needs reassurance. And at times of stress and strain, on occasions such as these, we need the consolations of philosophy, something to reassure us that this is part of a pattern, that ultimately all will be well. So Swamiji came to Dr. Kalyan Banerjee's house, and he so intensely experienced Dr. Banerjee's pain. And so Dr. Banerjee said, well, why did this happen? And Gokulanandaji had the great humility to say, I don't know. But that wasn't the end of it. He said, I don't know, and then he held Dr. Banerjee's hand and that of his wife. I think only Dr. Kalyan Banerjee, and I'm not sure that monks hold women's hands like that. But he held Dr. Banerjee's hand, and there was such a powerful empathy, a powerful compassion that he transmitted to the couple and to the family. And for me, that is the Swami Gokulananda that I remember, that I celebrate, and that I have learned so much from. Thank you very much.
so that making one's own had become so powerful in Swami Gokulanandaji. Everyone, small, young, old, anyone coming to him felt a sense of fulfillment. हर एक सोचने लगे कि महाराज जी हमको बहुत प्यार करते हैं। आज सुबह से इतने लोगों से मैं मिल रहा हूँ, सारे एक ही बात कहते थे कि महाराज बहुत मुझे प्यार करते हैं। So he was making everyone his own. Well, I want to just narrate one incident. I would leave it to Shri Junjunwala ji to say. He was just referring to, I think he would tell it better. After that, I would call Dr.
मैं बैठा हुआ था तो मुझे स्मृति आई कि हमारे रामकृष्ण मिशन दिल्ली में अगर किसी आदर्श भक्त की मैं कल्पना करूं तो मेरे सामने मिस्टर मलिक का चेहरा सामने आता है। आज वो हमारे बीच में नहीं है, श्रीमती मलिक यहाँ हैं और ये मैं उल्लेख करना चाहूँगा कि श्री मलिक के बैकबोन को हम बहुत ही मिस करते हैं। इन शब्दों के साथ मैं एक बात और कह दूँ, अभी राजीव मेहरोत्रा जी आपके सामने आए, उन्होंने ठाकुर के ऊपर एक फिल्म बनाई है 6 सीरियल में, वो टीवी पे ब्रॉडकास्ट की हुई है और रंगनाथानंद जी ने इनके इस प्रयास की बहुत प्रशंसा की है। धन्यवाद।
It is a great occasion in my life. I have lost my father. The relation with Swami Gokulanandaji myself, since he was here, gradually, जैसा स्वामी जी विजय महाराज जी बताया ना, मैं भी वही हूँ, स्वामी जी मुझे प्यार करते हैं। Then my association coming back, as Vijay Maharaj told, Revered Swami, परम पूज्य श्रद्धा स्वामी गोकुलानंदजी महाराज महाप्रयाण श्रद्धांजलि। My homage to गोकुलानंदजी। অবশেষে দিব্য জ্যোতি মহারথী রথে আরোহণ মহাশূন্যে পুণ্যধামে স্বস্থানে গমন। He went to his own place. মায়া রূপে কায়া ছিন্ন, body maya, he decided to detach himself. মায়া রূপে কায়া ছিন্ন, রেখে যাওয়া কীর্তি চিহ্ন, whatever he has left behind him. বিলীন গোকুলানন্দ আনন্দ সাগরে দিব্য লোকে বিরাজিত শান্তি পারাবারে। ব্যর্থ হলো ধরে থাকা, ব্যর্থ হলো ভক্তদের আকুল প্রার্থনা, বক্ষে লয়ে শুধু স্মৃতি তব পুণ্য নাম